Cuando nosotros vemos a Latinoamérica, el Caribe y España, no vemos las fronteras, vemos las
When we
necesidades,
see
las
the
oportunidades y también las
Caribbean,
esperanzas
Latin
compartidas
America,
por más
we
de
don't see
17 millones de
borders, we see
agricultores familiares. Ellos
opportunities.
producen la mayor parte de los
They
alimentos de la
produce
región que
most of the
contribuyen a la
region's
sostenibilidad
food
ambiental
that
y la
contributes
biodiversidad,
to the
pero también enfrentan
environmental
los desafíos de sostener
biodiversity,
y
and they
mejorar sus
face
sistemas
challenges
productivos en un
of
contexto de
sustaining
crisis
and
climática, a través
improving
de la
in
tecnología
a
y la innovación
context
aplicadas a
of
los sistemas
crisis through
agroalimentarios.
technology
Desafíos sin
and
fronteras que
agri-food
requieren soluciones
systems.
sin fronteras.
Challenges
Somos
and
Fontagro,
borders that
una
need
plataforma de
borderless
cooperación
solutions.
internacional
We
para
are
el desarrollo
Fontagro,
y
an
cofinanciamiento de
international
proyectos de ciencia e
platform
innovación
that
agropecuaria,
has
fundado hace más de 26 años, para
projects
impulsar la
funded more
investigación e
than
innovación
26
en la
years ago
agricultura
and to
regional,
promote research in
reconociendo su
regional
importancia prioritaria.
agriculture,
En América
recognizing its,
Latina y el Caribe,
its
contamos con una
priority in
sólida
Latin
estructura
America
de
and the
gobernanza
Caribbean.
conformado por
We
un
have a
consejo
solid
directivo, una
governance made
secretaría
up of
técnica,
a board of
administrativa,
directors,
para
a
unir
technical
esfuerzos y atraer
administrative
inversiones públicas y
secretariat
privadas en el
to
sector
unite
agropecuario,
efforts in the
formada por una
agricultural
alianza de 15
sector,
países miembros con el
formed by an
respaldo del
alliance of 15
ICA,
countries with the
Ministry
support
for
of the
Primary
BID,
Industries,
ICA, Ministry for
Research
Primary
Alliance,
Industries,
Global
Global
Methane
Research
Hub,
Alliance,
FAO,
Global Methane
CGR y
Hub,
Alianza
FAO,
Bioversity SIA. Impulsamos
CGR, and
proyectos
Alliance.
colaborativos
We
entre los
promote
investigadores de los
projects in
institutos nacionales de
collaboration
tecnología
with
de los 15 países de
researchers of
América
other
Latina, el Caribe y
institutes
España, con
of
quienes
15
hemos
countries in
contribuido a la
Latin America and
realización
the
de
Caribbean,
204
and we have
proyectos de innovación,
contributed
con una
to
inversión de más de
204 innovation
150 millones de
projects
dólares.
with
En la
more than
actualidad estamos
$150
ejecutando
million.
59 proyectos
We are
que conectan los
executing
esfuerzos de
59
1.500
projects
investigadores en
connecting
campos tan
efforts
diversos
of
como cultivos,
1,500
ganadería, alimentos y
researchers
mercados,
in different
recursos
fields,
naturales,
markets,
producción
food,
forestal y
natural
agricultura.
resources,
Somos
forestry
Fontagro,
production, and
ciencia colaborativa en
agriculture.
acción
We
para
are
un futuro sostenible
Fontagro,
e inteligente.
for working for the sustainable future and an intelligent one.
Welcome everyone, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Reimagining the Agri-Food Research and Development Global Shift, Institutional Innovation and the Future of Investment. Thank you for being here. Today we meet at a pivotal time as the agri-food and the innovation ecosystems are in a profound transformation, facing important challenges, but also opportunities. We are honored to have today three distinguished speakers, Dr. Philippe Hardy, Dr. Hernan Munoz, and Dr. Ruben Echeverria, each of whom has made significant contributions to the strengthening the research and innovation across countries in the agricultural sector. Their insights today will help us to better understand how we drive a change in the innovation system in Latin American countries and also in the rest of the world. Today, we are organizing this webinar also in the time of the new Fontagro medium-term plan, 2025-2030. So thank you very much to the speakers for being here with us today for this task. This webinar invites us to rethink the public and private collaboration models, which are a very important tool to drive changes, but also to move forward in better and more efficient investment in the agri-food systems. So with these words, I would like to start. And now is my pleasure to invite to the floor to Dr. Philippe Hardy. So Phil, thank you so much for joining us in this webinar, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Eugenia. It's a delight to be here, and I'll share my screen here and hope everyone can see that okay. So I'd like to cast my talk and remarks in the context that Eugenio opened with, and that is that we're on the cusp of a lot of change going on in agriculture and agri-food systems writ large, but also in the innovation systems that support technical progress in those sectors. So I'm going to reflect on the changes within those broader changes generally, and place them in an agri-food value chain context, and then reflect a little bit on the timelines, do a reality check on how long it takes to move from an idea to an innovation through to its commercialization and impact level, and then talk a little bit about the radically changed nature of investments with respect to the public and private sector in agri-food research, and just if I get some time at the end, just to indicate some institutional innovations around public-private research and development and innovation. So just starting off to level set us all, as we throw around these terms, but just to get a clear understanding of what we mean by research, development, innovation, and technical change, and particularly for those of us who try and study and measure these, we need to have some clarity as to actually what we're measuring and what we're studying. And so just thought I'd start off with a quick overview here. So in terms of research and experimental development, just to emphasize that they relate to sort of the creative and systematic work undertaken to increase the stock of knowledge, number one, and also to then devise new applications based on that stock of knowledge. And so the statisticians have 5 core criteria that they use to distinguish R&D investments or spending from other types of spending, and that is aspects of novelty, creativity, uncertainty. The processes need to be systematic, and they also need to produce transferable or reproducible sorts of results. And so investments with those sorts of attributes to them are classified as research and development. Innovation is a broader concept, and it moves and involves the implementation of, rather than necessarily the creation per se, of new or significantly improved products or processes. And just to mention, innovation may or may not involve R&D activity. There's a whole slew of activities that surround the sort of innovation ecosystem that I'll talk on briefly in a little minute. But just a lot of people confuse R&D and innovation, and whilst they're highly related, they're actually very different sorts of activities. And then economists generally talk about the notion of technical change, which subsumes research and development and innovation, but goes a step further to the impact of those innovations. So it's not just getting to the point of commercial release, but getting an understanding of the diffusion processes that either enhance or impede the uptake of new technologies, and often that involves creative destruction in the process of innovation, and I'll mention that a little bit later on in my remarks today. Just stepping back, I mentioned innovation is a much broader concept than research and development investments, and there's various ways people characterize research and innovation. I've given a fairly classic characterization here in this schema of them involving a slew of sort of discovery, incubation, and acceleration activities. And you can see in this characterization, I have included research and development, ranging from basic and applied to more development type research, but also encompassing things like market discovery, insights with respect from farmers and potential consumers, so understanding the nature of those markets for those innovations, lots of trialing and proof of concept activities and partnership building that's often involved in the incubation stage. And then at the scaling and acceleration stage, a lot of investment and effort that needs to take place in terms of go-to-market sorts of activities, establishing distribution channels, understanding regulatory hurdles and constraints and requirements to get innovations into the market. And so whilst I've got a fairly linear discovery to incubation to acceleration representation here, just to recognize that there's often feedback loops that once you start down a discovery process and get into incubation, you might feed back and do some more basic research or adaptive research to recalibrate the innovation process. And so it is a complex chain to try and tease apart, but it is the key to getting ideas from the lab or the brain, should you say, out into the market. I mentioned I'd like to pitch my research development innovation remarks in the context of an agri-food value chain context, because I think it's a really useful framework to understand the complexity that happens over time and space across countries or within market segments, and think about the role of innovation in that context. And just here's a schema that we developed for some work that we've done recently for the FAO, and just trying to broaden out beyond the farm. And so whilst we have a lot of on-farm services that we're looking with respect to the innovation space in the agri-food sector, to recognise that there's a lot of pre-farm services that go in to farming operations, but importantly a host of post-farm services that go and include transformational processing activities into distribution and retail and consumption. And just to reflect, I think that even when you're focusing on technologies at a farm level, these pre-farm and particularly the post-farm attributes of processing and so forth feed back into the types of characteristics that are important for what's being developed and grown and produced on farms. And so I think an aspect of development is a much more integrated process of not just on-farm innovations, but thinking about the pre and post-farm relationships. And I went through just to get a sort of industrial organization view about how many actors there are in these various pre, on and post-farm areas. And just for the US, you can cast your eye over there and see the order of magnitude of the number of firms or entities that are involved in the pre-farm services, the on-farm services and the post-farm services. And even within the on-farm services there, you can see in the middle, there's a huge disparity in the types of farms and therefore their relationship to the value chains that they serve, even within the US. And so a huge range in firm size or farm size, if you will. The classic notion is that only 80% of the value of production is being produced by about 20% of the farmers. And so we've got a large number of smaller and medium-sized farmers, but a smaller number of very large farmers that are driving lots of the value added in these food systems. And so just adding up across those establishment totals, you can see whilst we often focus on the roughly 2 million or so farmers in the US, there are tens of thousands of pre-farm services and hundreds of thousands of post-farm services that need to be taken into account when you're thinking about where innovation fits within an agri-food value chain context. Being an Aussie, I also put the numbers together for Australia, just to give you an order of magnitude sense there. So Australia, obviously a lot smaller value chains, but the same sort of complexity there beyond just the farm level to think about in an agri-food value chain context. I wanted to mention that whilst particularly in sort of a lot of development initiatives, there's a lot of focus not only just on farmers and farming, but also on the smallholder attributes of those farm sectors. And I wanted to focus on innovation as a process of change. And so just to give you a sense of the order of magnitude of the development at the broad economy level into which agri-food value chain innovations sit. And so in these data here, what we did was actually pull together all the numbers from 1961 to now of GDP per capita, just to show you how many countries move over time from one income status here in terms of their gross national income per capita into another. And so you can see back in the day, using World Bank standards, we had 59 countries that were classified as low-income countries, about 82 lower and middle, and 30 upper and middle, and only 24 high-income countries. If you fast forward today, to today being 2022 here, you can see the number of low-income countries is more than halved. We've had a diminution in the number of lower middle-income countries from 82 to 55, an increase in the upper middle-income countries from 30 to 52, and a very substantial number of increase in the high-income countries to 24 to 62. And so you can see the dynamics as countries move here from low income to lower middle to upper middle. So when we started with 59 countries in 1961, of those 59 countries, only 24 of them now are still in a low income status. And 29 of those previously low income countries have migrated to lower middle, 6 to upper middle, and so forth. So you can see over time, when you're thinking about the timelines in which innovation processes play out, and I'll talk to the specifics of those timelines a little bit later in my remarks, you need to think about looking forward, not just a year or two or an election cycle or two, but in decades, not just years, to think about how these innovation processes play out. And they do have really substantial impacts, as we see here, not just in the agricultural sectors, but the broader economic sectors per se. There are stages of transformation. I mentioned these sort of pre, on-farm and post-farm activities that go on. One of the things we've found useful to do is sort of petition when you're thinking from a policy perspective, how do you start to sort of pass down this complexity? And so we've identified these sort of traditional, transitional and technology intensive types of characterizations. And so you can work across sort of at the pre-farm level where you're going, or on the on-farm level, you're going from, say, subsistence or near subsistence production systems to those that become increasingly integrated, say, into their input supply sectors, and then ultimately become much more integrated into the post-farm operations. There are these very complex processes that play out. And so lots of other policies and investment strategies besides investments in research and development are required to facilitate innovation in a broader agri-food value chain context. And just to have a sense of where the value add is in these value chains, here's some calculations that the USDA Economic Research Service do. And just to emphasize that even within the US, if you pass down where the value add or the cost centers are within a food dollar in the US, less than 10 cents of that dollar comes from value added in the farm production part of that value chain. Big chunks of the value added are in the food processing and retail trade, and particularly in the food service trade. And so there's innovations, as I said, repeat, on farm that impact these pre and post farm activities and vice versa. And so you need to have a much more integrated view about the innovation ecosystem to realise value across that whole agri-food value chain. And so if we just focus just on the sort of value add within primary agriculture, that's less than 1% of the value add in the US economy, but it's 5.6% if you broaden it out to encompass the food and post-farm aspects of agri-food systems. So there's a sense of sort of where in the value chain the value is added. I thought I'd give you a brief look at where in the world agriculture takes place in terms of the value of production. So the good news is from 61 to 2022, we've had in real terms and inflation adjusted terms a fourfold increase from about $1 trillion to over $4 trillion in primary agricultural production. But where in the world that production takes place has changed dramatically. So we can see back in the day, around 45% of the gross value of production in global agriculture took place in the high income countries. That's more than almost halved today in terms of their global share. So whilst obviously the total amount of production in the high income countries has increased, their share of the global total has reduced dramatically. The big growth has been in the middle income countries, including the lower and the upper middle income countries. So in 1961, they accounted for about just over 52% of the value of production. Today, almost 3/4 of the world's value of agricultural output takes place in the middle income countries. And I think that's a reality that lots of people don't really have their head around at the moment. So the middle income countries are really important in terms of their participation in primary production in agriculture. And I just should mention, unfortunately, the low income countries have barely increased. They've gone from around 3% to 3.6% share of the global value of agricultural production. Looking agroecologically, what we did here was look at the value of crop production worldwide and went latitude by latitude and added up all the value that took place at each point heading from the northern part of the planet to the southern part of the planet. And here's a map, a geographical map of where in the world agricultural production takes place across key major crop groups. And it turns out, as probably many of you know, because a lot of you come from represent areas south of the equator, only about 26% of the world's total land area and 18% of the total harvested area is located south of the equator. And so that means the bulk of global production, around 85% of global production in crop production, takes place north of the equator. And 60% of that is in the temperate north, and only 5% of that is in the temperate south. And so I just put in there in latitudinally to show you where Latin America sits. And so whilst Latin America spans a big part of the planet from the Tropic of Cancer way down south, a substantial share of the land area and the agricultural area in Latin America lies south of the equator. So So that has implications for the sort of location specificity of technology and with respect to agroecological attributes that define where in the world production technologies in particular can take place. Just to give us a collective sense of a timeline reality check of how long it actually takes inventions and innovations to get to the point of commercialization. I know this is a horrendously complicated looking table here, but what I did was I tracked through key technologies, mechanical, chemical, and biological and food processing technologies in agri-food innovations. And I also tracked a couple of industrial innovations, mRNA vaccines, COVID vaccines, for example, and semiconductors and transistors, and just looked at all of the steps, public and private, that take place from inception to commercialization and then subsequent adaptation and further development. And if you cast your eye down each of these, the tractors or milking machines or herbicides or BT corn or so forth, you can see lots of points of innovative steps along the way in these innovation processes that goes on for 2 pages. But just to summarize and to benchmark us from initiation to first commercial release, these are the number of years that it takes across these slew of fairly substantial technologies just to get to the point from where we went from very basic innovative type research to commercial release. So these are not years, these are multi-decades. And it's not true that agriculture is necessarily a much more time-intensive process than other innovations. These represented here and others that we've looked at also take many decades, those outside the agri-food sector, to get to commercial release. But commercial release is only part of the process. We then have to get those technologies used. And so here's some evidence we put together for the US across sort of general technologies, genetic technologies, and also digital technologies of just how long it takes to get market penetration in terms of the percent of area or the percent of production that's actually using these technologies. And again, these are not years, these are decades typically to get up to market penetration levels of 70, 80, 90%. So these are very long processes that play their hand out. Also just wanted to focus in, so here is the uptake of wheat varieties that were released after 1920. And you can see that it took until the 1950s, even here in the US, to get to a situation where modern wheat varieties found their way out through farmers' fields in the US. And I just wanted to emphasize that innovation is not a one and done prospect. It actually requires setting up processes that are ongoing and create an ongoing stream of technologies, in this case varietal innovations, to improve yields and other attributes of crop performance. And so we've put together some hard-won data here for the United States and Canada just to illustrate this, where we've looked at the area shares by variety from the 1920s in the US and in the 1940s in Canada, and tracked out the sort of adoption profiles of all of the varieties in the US and Canada. So these are thousands of varieties that have hit farmers' fields in both of those countries. Each one of these colours represents a particular variety, and you can see these waves of varietal change that took place over the decades. And importantly, none of the colours that you see on the right-hand side of the screen are reflected in the left-hand side of the screen, and that's because we've replaced a lot of varieties over time. And these data, which I won't go into in detail here, show that this nature of creative destruction is really critical for thinking about ongoing productivity performance in agriculture. The rate of turnover of varieties is massively increased over time. The average age of varieties in farmers' fields has decreased over time. And in fact, the density of varietal heterogeneity in farmers' fields, so you get a better matching of genetics by environment, has increased dramatically as well. And so just wanted to really emphasize that we're talking about setting up processes, not thinking about releasing a particular innovation to drive productivity performance in agriculture. So I wanted to then reflect on some new numbers that we're putting together. This is work we're doing here at the University of Minnesota in partnership with the partnership unit at the CGIAR. and also in collaboration with Hernan and his colleagues at FAO. And Hernan's going to talk about some of the great work that they're doing at FAO with respect to putting together new and improved data and up-to-date data on investments in public sector ag R&D in countries around the world. What I'm going to give you is a preliminary look at some new estimates that we hope to release in final form this summer, and what's going on with respect to public and private agri-food spending worldwide since 1980. So these are in purchasing power parity measures. So we try to take account of price differentials between countries when we add up spending from Argentina and Australia and the US and so forth. And we're also adjusting for inflation over time. So these are ostensibly inflation adjusted, price calibrated views about global investments in public and private agri-food spending. Again, the good news is in real terms, we've gone from around $41 billion of investment in 1980 into 2019, we've got around $109 billion of investment. But you can see here, splitting out these investment levels by the high, upper middle, lower middle and low income countries, very different trajectories in terms of the rates and levels of change of investments in public and private research in these parts of the world. I draw your attention particularly to the upper middle income countries, which I'll talk to a little bit in the next few slides, but a very fundamental change in the investment trajectories of the upper middle income countries, which is driving a major shift in the geography of agricultural investments and agricultural innovation worldwide. So that shift is reflected in part by this figure here, which I don't understand why it's not completely showing here. We've lost some figures out here on the top here, but just to point out that dark blue there is North America. The grey is Europe and Central Asia. The green there is Latin America. So by my estimates, around 7% of the world's public and private agri-food research is done in Latin America and the Caribbean. The yellow area there is Sub-Saharan Africa, which is around 3%. I draw your attention to the red area there. So our estimates are that almost half of the entire world's agri-food investment spending in the public and private sector now takes place in Asia and Pacific. And these data are geopolitical, so they're not by per capita income status. So when I say Asia and Pacific, I'm grouping together not just India and China, but also Japan and Indonesia and Australia and so forth. And so the geography of investments in global agri-food systems is changing very, very dramatically. You can see here, as I mentioned earlier, the middle income countries are becoming dominant players with respect to investments in agri-food research. So the green line there indicates the level of investment by Brazil, India and China alone. So those three countries collectively started out spending the US in 2008, and by 2015 they were on par with the combined investment of all of the other high income countries. And so a huge shift in terms of the role of these three particular middle income countries and other middle income countries in terms of their investments. Just for the point of this presentation, I also teased out the Latin America totals there to give you a sense of the trends in those for Latin America, including Brazil, and other Latin America as Latin America and the Caribbean, excluding Brazil. Who's doing this research and who's investing in R&D is also changing big time. You can see here in our new estimates that back in the day, around 2/3 of the investments were done by the public sector, and now about a third by the private, and now it's about 50-50 public and private. So huge shift in that public-private split going on, as indicated here. And just to indicate, most people don't realise in general, the far right there shows about $2.6 trillion worth of investment in all R&D, so that's health, engineering, agriculture and so forth. And only about a third of that research is done by the public sector, and almost over 2/3 of it's done by the private sector. And so these data are indicating that the nature of innovation in the agri-food space is looking more, not less like the investment structures for innovation writ large. And so I think it's important to bear that in mind as we think about over the decades ahead what the appropriate policy stance is with respect to investments in the agri-food space. Clearly not all countries are equal in terms of their drifts towards the private sector. So I mentioned 37% private research in 1980 up to around 50% now. The high income countries, around 50% of their total is done in the private sector. In fact, in the US, it's almost 70% of all the research done in the agri-food space is done by private companies, whereas in low income countries, there is a movement towards the private sector, but much less private participation for all sorts of innovation ecosystem and market realities. But just point you again to the upper middle income countries in particular, a big move towards private participation in those markets as well as just the high income countries. Point to note is on the geographical concentration of agri-food investments. We can see here that if we ranked countries in terms of their public-private research spends from biggest to smallest, the bottom 100 countries account for just 3% of the total investment. Brazil here, as you can see, accounts for 4%. And in fact, just 5 countries, bear that in mind, 5 countries account for more than half the world's entire investment in the agri-food space. I teased out a couple of days ago in our data the Latin American figures, and you can see here that the geographical concentration in Latin America is even more pronounced than it is in the world generally. And so we have 3 countries, Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico, accounting for almost 80% of or around 80% of the total investment in public and private agri-food research in Latin America, Caribbean. A lot of attention has been given to the role of private or startup capital and venture capital in the agri-food tech space. Here's some data that the AgFunder produced recently, showing you the large run-up and then the very dramatic decline in investments in that space. I just wanted to give you a sense of where in the world those investments take place. So around half of it takes place in the Americas, which is including North and South America, a substantial share in the Asia region as well. But just to benchmark you as to what types of investment categories are focused in this area, and just to indicate that around 80% of those investments take place not with respect to focusing at farm level technologies, but looking at the post-farm technologies, and particularly in food logistics and food delivery services and things of that nature. And so, these investments are an important development, I think, with respect to the innovation ecosystem, but their magnitude is not such that they're going to necessarily be a replacement. They're a complement, not a replacement, for lots of investments that take place through other means. And they're also very targeted by geography, but also particularly by market segment, in where there can be a return on those investments. So just in the last couple of minutes here, I'll give you just a sense. I think that the conversation for the rest of the meeting will focus on some of these institutional innovations that take place with respect to sort of public-private agri-food research, development, innovation, and give you just a few of some that I'm familiar with, and some we've been trying to generate here at the University of Minnesota. So I run co-directed an entity called GEMS Informatics here, which is actually a joint venture within the university between the College of Food, Agriculture and Natural Resource Sciences and our Supercomputing Institute, recognizing that a huge trajectory going forward in agriculture is sort of driving the data revolution in agriculture. But that comes with lots of complexity with respect to how to realize the benefits of that data revolution. And we recognized from the get-go that we needed to think about integration of very complex data sets spanning genetic, by environment, by management, by socioeconomic, hence GEMS, but also thinking about how we recognize that a lot of the innovation that's going on involves private sector participation in that agri-food innovation segment. And also a lot of the data is increasingly encumbered with IP or data privacy or data sensitivity issues, even just accessing and using farm data. That data is owned by those farmers unless they give those ownership rights away. And so we have to be mindful about not just fair data practices, that is sort of findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable, but ethical data practices, number one, so that we respect these data privacy and data IP issues, But we also have reproducibility. So we have version data juxtaposed against version-coded workflows, so that increasingly we can produce reproducible results. And so we've been thinking not just about open data or private data, but how can we incentivize an exchange and use of data through creative means. And so we've developed a data exchange platform in our Supercomputing Institute that allows for what I call the purposeful pooling of data, where you can incentivize public and private partners to come together and to pool their data around a common problem that they're facing, or to accelerate innovation in this space. And so, for an example, we're doing a lot of work with PepsiCo in terms of genomic analysis, data hosting, predictive analytics, business intelligence, and so forth. They now have 12 or so full-time Pepsi folks sitting on our campus here at the university, engaged in all sorts of research across campus, and really trying to work through not avoiding sort of private capture from public dollars, but thinking about where there's a shared public-private innovation space, so we can be producing, enhancing private innovation at the same time as producing public goods. We also have in our platform, we also support the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, which is an interesting innovation here in the US to allocate funding into R&D from the public purse that's then matched with private dollars to bring together partners in research consortia that are working on a collective problem where perhaps each individual firm in that partnership doesn't have the scale to solve a problem that they all have a common interest in solving. And it also possibly requires, and often requires, public participation in that research. So we're now supporting about 8 research consortia, and each of those consortia set up their own data ecosystems where they get to decide who sees their data. It's their data, not our data, and how they share that data and use that data. So just thinking very creatively about how we can think of data as an asset and how we can use those assets to incentivize new innovation partnerships is a key part of what we're doing here at GEMS. One of the other, I think, interesting developments when I look around the world is the growth of private non-profit entities in the agri-food innovation space. And one that's based in Chicago that we're expanding our relationships with is Two Blades, which are an ag biotech company very focused on looking at mitigating risk through crop diseases or abiotic stresses in plants. And they position themselves to fill what they call the missing middle. That is to think about engaging both with the private sector and with the public sector, sort of bridge that gap between academia and industry. And encourage you to go and look at their website, and they've been going for now 20 years and to continue to grow their capacity. And they partner not only with large seed companies, but they also spend a lot of time thinking about translational research and to bring that to bear in developing countries around the world. And recognizing, again, that it's not just R&D, it's actually dealing with regulatory and other sorts of hurdles that are required to get technology actually out into farmers' fields. So they're advancing these sort of product-oriented translational researchers for smallholder crops at the same time as they're developing technologies that are being used by large agribusinesses and or large farmers in developed countries. And then finally, I mentioned we're doing quite a bit of work with the CGIAR, and they're probably one of the largest partnership organisations on the planet. They have around 2,000 active partners in around 126 countries. And we've actually launched with them a new project that's just getting underway with support from the Gates Foundation we're calling the AFI initiative, the Agri-Food Innovation Intelligence Initiative. And what we've seen is there's a lot of rhetoric around public-private partnerships, but there's a lot less support in trying to actually realise those partnerships. And so I mentioned what we're doing with respect to thinking carefully about data access and data use rights. Another one is, who do you actually partner with? So if you're developing or intending to develop a new technology, who are the sorts of partners that you might seek out in particular market segments or in particular jurisdictions to either do joint R&D development or technology scaling within a domestic or a multinational context? And so we're using a lot of AI and other advanced statistical tools to try and to work to develop a database that's basically to facilitate matchmaking between public and private sectors. And so we're in the early stages of that project, but we're very excited about where it could lead, and we're hoping to stand over the coming years to stand up this database to try and fill in the sort of information asymmetry that I think is a major impediment to realising public and private partnerships. So just to wrap up here in this final slide, just to indicate, I showed that there are massive changes in the geography of agricultural production. We have other data that we've been pulling together for FAO for their forthcoming PATIO report that's going to be coming out in October later this year. The size and structure of farmings and the associated value chains that those farms support are also changing radically over time. And so we need to think in a very agile and forward-looking fashion about how to position our investments in the agri-food space to make best impact in those rapidly changing agri-food value chain ecosystems. But also to be conscious of the sort of stage of development of countries and recognising that even within a country, particular value chains are at different stages of development, and so we need to think through the complexities of those to have the best impact we can. Just as I mentioned, huge unprecedented changes in agri-food R&D spending, and particularly the rise of the middle-income countries, and certainly a falling or faltering investments amongst high-income countries, which is actually spreading beyond the high-income countries we see in our new data. It's a worrying development that there is a slowdown or even a cutting back going on beyond even the high-income countries now. But certainly a widespread but an even increase in the private sector share of that spending. And just to reiterate a major remark here, which I think is important for the conversations you're going to be having with Fontagro, I think it's imperative for us to sort of reset and revitalise investments in this space. But I think it's equally imperative that we think through and effect a lot of institutional innovation to leverage the public-private R&D possibilities, but being very cognizant of the timelines that are involved to get from ideation to impact. So with that, I thank you for your attention and pass it back to Eugenia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pardee. I agree with the need of identifying the missing middle. And of course, I think all the national institutions and also universities need to work more in what is the efficient portfolio, the more efficient pipeline they can create, that combination in product and services that can move forward innovation. So just these few words, and now I want to invite Dr. Hernan Munoz to give his presentation. Hernan, the floor is yours.
Okay, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Eugenia. I'm going to present in Spanish. My name is Hernan Munoz. I am in charge of the ASTI project in FAO in Rome. This is a project that is relaunching the gathering of data. I will be very brief because I would like to tell you what we are doing in FAO, and I will supplement Phil's work and presentation and tell you what happens with this project that started 2 years ago, and we still have a long way to go. We are working with different countries to better understand the data gathered by IFPRI, to have data about the different systems of agricultural research in the different countries. So basically, this is a group of indicators used for public policies to do some follow-up about the national resources, technological resources that were used to establish future actions within the investigation or research sectors. So we work with different science and technology institutions like ASTI, gathering institutional inversion data, and we The data that I will represent was gathered in the last meetings, but we will launch and speak about the different variables in the countries to have worldwide data and to speak about the used resources investigated by different groups of researchers and to have better estimates of what is going on in the world regarding data and research and development. So we are using data that already exists in the European Union, and we are using it with the information that ASTI and ISPRI used to work in this region.
We are gathering information in the region's systems. We've identified that there's heterogeneity in the sizes. We have a small, medium, large, and large sizes, as Phil was saying, in terms of contributions in the Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina. There are different aspects in terms of what each country generates in the ASTI, and everything is very valuable at a national level. And we want to make all these efforts visible in terms of having data by country. As you can see, in most countries, systems don't have over 20 agencies, and we include universities or national institutes. These are the organizations that lead in research. The FAO, as part of a project supported by the Gates Foundation, we are working on a global project. We want for this information to exist officially. It's integrated in the FAO platform, FAO Stat, and we also want to integrate this with regional commitments. We are working in organizations in Africa, and we are also working on fostering public policies based on evidence or evidence-based public policies. And then in terms of R&D nationally, we are going to collect from the countries a questionnaire every year, and this is going to help promote and strengthen capacities at a national level. As you can see, these are the data we have as of today. And Phil mentioned some information, but we gathered some information in the region before 2015, and there was another gathering in 2020 and after, but we need more updated information. And for this, FAO this year and next year will provide technical assistance to the countries in the region. Some of the countries we were working with in terms of pilot projects and regional workshops, but we are also working one-on-one with the countries that need more support in order to systemize and harmonize the data. These are the 3 countries where we are running some pilots: Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador. There was some surveying, and this allows us to understand what is working, how much is being invested, how many researchers there are in each country. We have tested different data collecting models. Some are the statistics offices, the science and technology agencies, or the agriculture, science and technology institutes. This is the players that collect data. This is the new questionnaire that I'm presenting. This is what the FAO is going to send each of the countries. These are the focal points that will inform so we can gather official information. And this is going to be published in FAO Stat. The users in general will be able to analyze complete a database that today is inexistent with global information in terms of agriculture investigation systems, how much is being invested annually. This is the information that is going to be available in FAOStat. It can still be found at ASTI website, facilitated by IFPRI. We have the information up to 2016 and in some cases up to 2021. And these are some data from the region, mostly how Brazil, Argentina, in terms of trends, as well as Mexico led. But in terms of the ratios, with different intensities, you will see the different intensities in the charts and the recommended optimal levels that are recommended per country. Then we have information available in terms of how the systems are working, in terms of participation, contribution of different sectors, what contribution to R&D have universities, higher education institutions, how much is driven by governments, and how much comes from nonprofits. We don't have any official information as of now, but we are working in advancing and exchanging ideas with Phil's team. Something interesting in terms of data is the characterization of human capital. What's the PhD, the master's degree participation, and bachelor's degrees in terms of the staff and the equivalent researchers there are in each country. Another product we have at your disposal and will be updated is the Global Directory of R&D agencies. This is a very important product for us because it provides a lot of information and because it allows to create networking and exchange information. We are also starting the 2025 round for data collection within the framework of this project. We are relaunching the ASTI data series. You can see there are 11 countries that already started their data collection process. We have another 8 countries that are going to start also collecting data. We are reconstructing their historical data. We expect to have more information by the end of the year, but in terms of preliminary estimations, in terms of structures and how the systems are organized, we can have some conclusions as to what the characteristics are, how the participation in PhD degrees increased in the region. We also saw some improvements in terms of gender equality. More women participate in the systems, at least in the countries where we've been analyzing the situation. And then some preliminary conclusions are that we've seen an increase in the amount of researchers. This also matches spending. There's a medium expense in the market between the agencies for agriculture, science, and investigation. There's a stable contribution by institutions or in the main sectors. The contribution in the sectors is stable and there's an increase in educational levels from researchers. This is part of what we see with this new data collection that we are conducting in the region, and we didn't have any updated information. One last comment has to do with the researchers staff. Women researchers are more, and here you have my contact information and more information on our project. I will leave a space for Ruben Echeverria to also participate. We are at your disposal to bring you any information you need. Thank you, Eugenia. Thank you so much, Hernan. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for the ST contribution. And the indicators you mentioned are very important. This adds a lot of value to the functions we have as part of the board of directors. Now I want to invite Dr. Ruben Echeverria. Ruben, we want to hear your experience as well and your contributions as to what we've seen this morning. Thank you, Eugenia, and good morning from Washington to all the participants. I've been following Philip Party for 40 years, and every time I hear him, I learn something. It's important that Fontagro and the organization can merge the analytical capacity and the University of Minnesota's work with our fantastic capacities. Bringing them together in this event is of the utmost importance. We need a long-term capacity and the ongoing data. The data, the outlook is not great. The FAO and Phil's work is wonderful, but we can see an underfinancing in agricultural research. And what we've been saying for 30 years is that maybe this is more important than ever. So Eugenia, we are putting more pressure on you, but I believe that Fontagro is faced with a greater challenge than 30 years ago. Why? Because of what we've just seen. There's a revolution in financing, there's a revolution in research and all that. So my 3 points, so we can wrap up this great event, are something that we always see. This is the opportunity to rethink Fontagro. I'm sure that with Eugenia's management capacities, with the directors and everyone, this is going to be accomplished. But I believe that this is a regional forum. It's a hub. It's the platform to carry out these meetings and to make that shift in the underfinancing. And the only way is through partnerships, unless a miracle happens. So we need to prioritize the partnerships and alliances. This is easier said than done, but I believe that Fontagro is the institution in the region that can allow can make this happen. And second term, how can we prioritize those 5 flagships that Fontagro is pointing out in the strategic plan? I think that's very important. And also we can focus on what Phil Party was just saying. How can we make for these public-private alliances to happen and to move the needle and create an impact? I think maybe in those 5 flagships, there's a cross-cutting aspect that we can extract. And the third aspect I want to mention, I think is very important, and I'm always at your disposal. Fontagro needs Brazil, Mexico, and many other potential members. I think the challenge Fontagro has before reaching their 30th anniversary is to bring Mexico, Brazil, other countries in the Americas. I think it's very important. Thank you for having me, and good luck, Fontagro.
Phil, thank you so much for all your insight. I really took note, very important note. We live in always under uncertainties, and the only way to cope with that is with innovation, is with research, and it's a process that we have to invest and take care all the time. And I think most of the countries, not just Latin American countries, worldwide, we need to have a very good policies to be sure that the investment, public investment and private investment, are given in a proper way and sustainable way as well. So, and also this is a challenge for the universities that are always like on the side, is my feeling. We need to make our universities work together with the National Research Institute as well, and try to identify which is the more efficient portfolio. I mean, when we work in finance, we always talk about what is the portfolio that add value to the company. If I want to make a translation to the R&D agri-food systems, we need to help the public sector and the private sector to focus in which is the more efficient and valuable portfolio or pipeline that those organizations can have. So this is just my big idea, and I think the big challenge that we have ahead in Fontagro. And well, thank you so much for your presentation, for your words. Thank you to the audience that is in the YouTube channel. At Fontagro, we are really committed on keep these dialogues going, and also to strengthen cooperation, strengthen partnerships, and let's hope to work together soon. So thank you, Phil, again, and thank you, Hernan and Ruben.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Jay.